Well, UFC fans, we're back with a UFC 279 episode on the Big Beat podcast. Before I bring in my UFC friend, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. See all my content. Uploaded a Jaguar video last night, so you can check that out. Also, check out the Big Beat podcast on Spotify and Apple. So, joining us for UFC 279 from the Action Network and Fantasy Lab, Billy Ward. So, Billy, this feels like a unique pay per view with zero, and I mean zero title fights on Saturday night, right?
Yeah, unique is what I would say a pretty generous term for this one. Not only is there not a title fight, we're not really expecting a close main event. It's obviously Nate Diaz or Khamzat Chimaev headlining the card. And I get that the interest in both of those two fighters is high, but Diaz is on his way out the door. Khamzat beating, the 45th ranked welterweight according to Tapology, and Nate Diaz doesn't really move his stock up at all. So it feels like, kind of a big ask to get us to shell out $75 for this one. But, big Nate Diaz fan, love watching Khamzat. Just wish we had a better matchup for both those guys. I'd love to see Diaz fight another veteran on his way out the door. Love to see Khamzat fight, Colby Covington or for the title or someone like that. But we're working with what we got. There's just as many prizes for DFS, just as many betting opportunities as always. So that's where my focus will be.
So, in the main event, we've got Khamzat Chimaev against Nate Diaz. And have you seen a line like this line? Because Chimaev is, depending on what site you use, up to a plus 18, minus 1800.
Yeah, I mean, and that's about right. I saw minus 950 when I was putting my spreadsheet together yesterday, and it's probably moved even more since then. I really don't see the case on Diaz winning this one. I guess if you wanted to make that argument, it would be that he can survive the storm from Chimaev, who kind of gassed out in a 3-round fight against Gilbert Burns. Or was that 5 rounds? Let me check that real quick. No, that was a 3-round fight. So, if Diaz can survive 2, 3, 4 rounds of relentless pressure from Chimaev and then finish him in the 5th, maybe. But even that's hard to see. Diaz doesn't have big power for the division. Chimaev isn't going to the mat if he doesn't want it to be there. So Diaz's excellent jiu-jitsu probably won't come into play unless Chimaev makes a silly mistake. So, yeah, I mean, the line's about right. From a DFS standpoint, we always talk about in cash games, we play both guys. There's only one 5-round fight. I think we probably still do that this time just because Diaz throws a ton of volume striking wise, and he might have a better DFS score than actual performance. But I wouldn't hate it just playing Khamzat if you think Diaz just gets destroyed in the first minute or so, which is a distinct possibility this time. Chimaev could throw him on the ground, beat him up. He's going to be 15, 20 pounds bigger than Diaz, who's not really a legitimately welterweight sized fighter. So I don't know. It'll be fun to see both those guys get in there, but I'm not expecting a lot from Diaz's side.
Yeah, how about Chimaev 11-0 in the UFC, and he can knock you out, he can submit you, or he can go to distance. So this guy feels like one of the next up and coming fighters from Eastern Europe. I feel like, yeah, with a good performance, if he destroys Nate Diaz like I think he will on Saturday night, I'm not sure it helps him, but Chimaev feels like he should get a title shot, whether it be later this year or early next year.
Yeah, it's been tough for Khamzat because he had the fight against Gilbert Burns his last time out, and he beat the second or third best welterweight in the world, or fourth at worst, in Burns, and it almost felt like his stock went down a little bit because he didn't put him away early. He kind of faded down the stretch, although he rallied a little bit at the end. So we saw perhaps the only weakness in his game being his cardio, which could be a problem in 5-round fights. But then, obviously Leon Edwards upsetting Kamaru Usman, those two are probably going to run it back. So we probably have close to a year before we see Khamzat get to fight for the title at this point. And, we've been calling him the uncrowned champion or the, unofficial champion for a while now, the way he's just rolling through people. And I don't think this fight gets him any closer. I think we have to do Usman Edwards 3 before any of that. And then, maybe next summer, next fall will be the earliest we can see another title shot for Khamzat. I'd love to see after this one, if Covington gets back in action, him get through Covington. Because if you beat Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington, really hard to deny a title fight at that point.
This feels more like a payday, if you ask me.
And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. As someone who, had to fight to make a living at one point in my life, by all means, get what you can. I do feel bad. Diaz has been very public about wanting out of the promotion, and feeding him to probably the scariest guy in the division on his way out the door is not how I'd like to see a, respected veteran who's been with the UFC since, as you pointed out, Ultimate Fighter 5. I don't want to see that kind of treatment. I wish he got kind of the John Old Cerrone, Jim Miller thing where he gets to fight some other aging dude, has some fun on the way out. But, when you speak out against Uncle Dana, that's kind of what tends to happen.
Well, speaking of Nate Diaz, I remember him many, many years ago because he was a big lightweight. Like he was 6 feet 155 and one of those two old school gangsters. I remember Nate Diaz literally submitting everybody on the Ultimate Fighter. And then those great showdowns with Conor McGregor.
Yeah, and I think the McGregor fight is kind of where people are building the case for Diaz because he wasn't expected to have a chance in that one. But man, Khamzat's a different beast. Like just the size discrepancy here. You brought up him being a big lightweight. I think Diaz is one of those guys who would have really benefited from like the 160-pound division they have over in Eagle, because I think it was hard for him to make lightweight, but he's certainly not a true welterweight size-wise. He's just, pretty slender, small frame. And Khamzat's fought at middleweight and looked reasonably sized at 185. So Diaz is going to be giving up a lot of size in this one to a massive welterweight in Khamzat, which just is one more case against him and not something he had to deal with McGregor, who was a featherweight.
I mean, I think Diaz's only hope of winning this fight is maybe hope Chimaev just takes him lightly and maybe he can submit him because we know what kind of jiu-jitsu and submitting skills Diaz possesses, but I feel like this is Diaz's last fight in the UFC, and I think we're going to see the passing of the torch from one great veteran to potentially the future or one of the futures at 170 pounds.
Yeah, the saying for a while has been that Diaz brothers don't lose fights, they just run out of time. Because we even saw against Leon Edwards, Diaz won the 5th round, almost knocked Leon Edwards out after getting dominated the whole time. That's probably his best hope here is, Khamzat gets tired, kind of takes a bad shot, leaves his knockout there. But I think Khamzat probably puts him away before that. So again, I'm not betting this one. I'm just not going to lay that kind of money on Khamzat. If you feel the need, I'd bet him, and bet him in under 2.5 rounds or him to finish inside the distance. And then from a DFS standpoint, Khamzat puts up big scores, probably will again. I don't mind Diaz from a cash game standpoint just because he should have a solid floor with how much volume he throws, as long as he can last more than a round or two.
Agree. So now we head from the main event to a co-main event of two more welterweights. So Li Jinling and Tony Ferguson. So what do you expect in that fight? Because this doesn't feel like a co-main event of a pay-per-view. This feels like one you could have on ESPN or ABC, if you ask me.
I mean, I get it from a name recognition or like ranking standpoint. 100% agree with you. Could be an incredibly fun fight. I mean, Ferguson does nothing but make fights awesome up until, as of late, he inevitably gets knocked out. And I really don't like him stepping up to 170. I know he said he's had a hard time making 155, but Leach is a big, powerful welterweight who, usually either gets submitted or loses fights on the ground or knocks guys out pretty violently. Against a guy like Ferguson, who's been knocked out pretty violently and on a 4-fight losing streak, I think it's a horrible matchup for him, but I do think Ferguson will make it a fun fight for however long it lasts. So from a matchmaking standpoint, I don't hate it. Ferguson, another guy I wish they gave a little bit better of a matchup for, as he's riding a 4-fight losing streak. But again, this is another one, Leach by knockout, depending on what those odds turn out to be. And then Leach will be a tremendous DFS play, both cash games and tournaments. Throws a ton of volume, huge knockdown rate, mixes in takedowns here and there, should be significantly bigger and stronger against a 38-year-old guy who's been knocked out a few times recently. That's pretty much everything you can ask for from a DFS fighter.
I've got a question. Why didn't the UFC just have Tony Ferguson against Nate Diaz? That makes more sense.
It would, and those are the kind of matchups I wish we saw for some of these older guys if they insist on still doing it. But you know, because I think they were a little bit angry at Diaz for all the stuff he'd been saying about wanting out, and they punished him by giving him Khamzat. Ferguson, I don't know what's going on. It was only 3 months ago that he ate that vicious knockout from Michael Chandler. Pretty quick turnaround for a knockout that bad, which I don't really like. So, Leach by knockout, Leach in the first round, Leach for DFS, all great options this week in terms of getting some money down on that. Maybe not the first round, but under 1.5 and Leach by knockout, something to that effect. First round might be asking a lot because Ferguson might make it interesting for a minute or two.
Yeah, until there are leashes flying around T-Mobile Arena on Saturday night, perhaps. So, besides the main and the co-main events, which fight are you looking forward to seeing?
I don't know how much looking forward to, but have some DFS interest in Ian Cutelaba versus Johnny Walker. Probably and these lines aren't out because it's Tuesday when we're recording this, but probably the likeliest fight to end early or end in the first round. Both guys are knockout artists, both hit real hard. I'm definitely seeing Cutelaba as the deserving favorite here. He's 28, mixed results in his last few fights, where Johnny Walker's 1-4 in his last 5 with 2 of those knockouts. I think Cutelaba is another great DFS play, more from a tournament standpoint. This will probably be the one that'll be the swing fight in my DFS article, just because we are so likely to see violence. I also like Hakeem Dawood versus Julian Erosa. He's more of a cash game guy for me from a DFS standpoint, but Dawood is just super active, and Erosa's kind of hittable and allows a lot of scoring against him, so that's a good one. There's actually some fun fights up and down this card. It's just the name recognition or like how important it is for the rankings and standings is a little bit lacking.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out if I know any of these fighters, and I barely know any. I barely know any of them.
Honestly, the opening matchup between Johan Leonese and Darian Weeks should be a banger too. Another welterweight bout. Leonese looked awesome on the Contender Series, won a knockout, showed a lot of skills in a lot of areas. Then he got knocked out by Gabe Green in his debut, but there's no shame in that. Green's been on a tear lately. Darian Weeks, 0-2 in the UFC, lost to Brian Barberina in his debut, and then Ian Gary in his last one. Not a huge shame in that, but not super high-ranked guys. And Leonese is the underdog. He's the cheaper fighter on DraftKings. I think he's another excellent play. I think he's a lot better than he looked in his debut, and Gabe Green's just a super tricky matchup. So that's another one I'm looking at. Definitely going to be betting on Leonese at plus money, as well as forcing him into a lot of DFS lineups.
Leonese probably more of a tournament play, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I could see him working into cash lineups just given his salary because he is the underdog. So I think he's like 7,900 or something like that. But probably safer in tournaments. But you're going to have a hard time finding 6 fighters that you feel like are safe that fit under the salary cap. So we're going to have to take some risks here and there somewhere.
Yeah, depending on the FanDuel one, I think Weeks is -146, Leonese plus 114.
Yeah, that's the best line on Leonese. I see Weeks as good as -125 with Leonese 105 on the comeback. So it's not a huge discount, but outside of Diaz, we got to find somebody cheap to put in our lineups. We can't play all heavy favorites. That's just not how it works. So do I feel super comfortable about it? No, but if it were easy, we'd all be millionaires doing it.
Or millionaires after this weekend, right?
Right. But other fight I did want to mention, Danielle Wolf, champion boxer, making her second professional MMA fight. Her first came on the Contender Series. 39, which I don't love, getting into a new sport in your late 30s. She's fighting Norma Dumont, who in her last 5 fights, Dumont has 2 losses. They came to Macy Chiasson and Megan Anderson, both on the feet. She has 3 wins in there. But if you look through the people that she's fought, Dumont has all of her wins, the fighter is within 1 inch of her in reach. Both of her losses, she's giving up a few inches to her opponent. Dumont's taller with a longer reach, really likes fighting on the outside. Danielle Wolf is 5'11" with a 3-inch reach advantage. I think Danielle Wolf, despite being a pretty heavy underdog, is another fairly strong DFS option who's going to be super cheap. Dumont's 3 wins are all decisions, so we'll probably get 15 minutes out of Wolf. Being a former boxer, we'll probably see a high volume of striking too. And I like her upside to win, especially via knockout. So she's another one that I'm interested to at super cheap salary. And I actually already have a bet in on her, expecting that the line gets a little bit closer as we go throughout the week.
Is Wolf the cheap female fighter we won in cash-ins? Because we know how that worked last week with a cheap female fighter.
Well, in my defense, Perez still put up like 22 points or something, which wasn't bad for the second cheapest fighter on the slate. I don't necessarily want to say that. All the female fights this week are at heavier weight classes. Other than Elise Reed versus Melissa Martinez. So I'll probably target Martinez maybe in that one as a slight favorite, or Reed as an underdog if we need the salary. Just because those heavier female weight classes, the stoppage rates tend to be a little bit higher, closer to the men of the same size. So targeting those 145-pound women's fights isn't as much of a lock to go to a decision, whereas the 115-pound fight between Reed and Martinez is likelier. But you have to pay up for Martinez, which is the side I want to be on. So depends. I guess it depends on your salary needs and how you're building around that, because the other women's fight is Aldana versus Chiason, both former 145ers, I think, but this one's at 135. But they both have stoppage ability. They both have knockout or knockdown rates that rival their male competitors. So that one's certainly not safe to last 15 minutes.
It's a unique pay-per-view with only one fight, with no title fights and only one 5-round fight. It's going to be weird of like setting up finals, because I would have to say Chimaev is going to be the highest owned guy in cash and tournaments, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's not a ton of expensive fighters, I think, that people are going to be super excited to play. Some of the heavy favorites just don't feel all that good. And especially when like one of the heavier favorites is Norma Dumont at minus 350 or so, fighting a champion boxer. And Dumont doesn't have, great stats in terms of fantasy scoring. So not too many people are going to want to play her. So I think it's Chimaev and then probably Li Jingliang are going to be popular. Jalton Almeida too, because he's looked like an absolute wrecking ball. But I'm a little bit worried about him fighting an undefeated Swedish prospect.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interest. So a little appetizer for the NFL slate this Sunday. So thanks for hopping on, Billy. We wish the DFS and your bets well this week, and hopefully we make a profitable weekend in Vegas.
Yep, and be sure to check out later in the week. I'll have the full DFS breakdown up at Fantasy Labs, some prize pick stuff at Action Network, especially for people like Dylan who aren't in legal betting states. That's a good way to get some action in if you have some strong takes. So even with the start of NFL, the MMA content grind will not stop. Ton of good stuff coming out.
You have to throw that thing about Florida not having legal betting when Kansas just put in legal betting.
Hey, I'm just trying to get this prize picks things off the ground. I'm doing full significant strike projections for every fighter on the slate. I think it's a really sharp way. I think those lines are a little bit softer than some of the betting markets. So, you can have a lot of fun on there. The parlay option makes it a little bit more game theory than making a straight bet, but definitely fun. Definitely love what they're doing over at Prize Picks.
Yeah, especially because you could like put 4 or 5 parlays together and turn $5 into 100, or like that one NASCAR guy did a week and a half ago when he turned 13 into like 900 something grand.
Yeah, using my coworker Nick Giffen, aka the RotoDocs NASCAR projections. That guy is the sharpest NASCAR better prognosticator, whatever you want to call him, I've ever met or hope to meet in my life. So if you're into the NASCAR stuff, be sure to check out RotoDoc and all his content at Action Network.
I need him to figure out when the next big one's going to happen, because the Sunday Southern 500 look like a what else is going to happen race.
Yeah, I got nothing. Not a NASCAR guy myself. We got people way smarter than on that.